Okay, Kevin, let's talk about what can I do or what should I do once I've got a new job. Let's say I've now graduated and I follow all your tips and advice on getting a job. So now, luckily or fortunately, I got the job that I want, and now I get on board to the company. Then, is there some tips or what can I do or what is the learning process like in the first few weeks or even months of entering a new company and a new job? Can you talk a little bit of that?
Sure, yeah. Well, some of these things are so basic we take it for granted that nobody really talks about it. But I will talk about it here because I don't want to assume anyone who hasn't worked before to assume that they know, right? Um, so let's go from the very first thing. You wake up every morning, you dress up, you go to work, you push open the office door. Normally, the first thing on the first day would be some sort of orientation, okay? Possibly with HR for some time, just to get you settled down, sign some paperwork. A lot of companies that are sizable would have a short workshop for orientation, a few hours, where they'll invite someone senior from the business or someone senior from the HR, give you the once over about introduction to the company. Then you'll be sitting with other similar people like you, graduates who've just joined. And sometimes they're not just graduates. So any new joiner, and they run it maybe once a month. That actually is a good opportunity to get to know people, because you know that everybody in the room is at the same time scale as you are, right? So naturally, you're all, you know nothing about the company. You're all rookies for this company, and it's easy to strike up a conversation. So I would actually use that quite a bit to just befriend someone, and then find out what they do, especially those people that work either in your department or close to your department. It's good to just keep in contact and put a name to a face so that when you walk around the office later on, you can say hello. It's just an excuse to get to know people. And later on, this would lead into another question about how to build relationship with people at work. And then maybe the end of the first day, you get settled into your work place. You would have met your manager. You would have been introduced to your team. They sit you down, and normally some of the first thing would be, getting you the right access to systems, the logins and stuff like that. And you have to physically go in, set the password, make sure everything is working. So all of that is pretty straightforward. I won't talk too much about that. And then beyond that, the next day you come in, things will start to happen. And the speed of which it is happening is depending on the place that you work, right? The most typical thing that would happen is that your supervisor would maybe assign someone or some people to work with you with some dedicated time to explain to you the job that you're expected to do and how to do it. Now, if you're new to the job and you know very little about the job, they would spend a little bit more time explaining the background and the reasons why you're doing this job. And this is a very crucial moment because it sets up your attitude to learning anything new at workplace. And my suggestion would be you take this very seriously, just like you are going to a lecture. You pay attention to the things that they're saying, except that this time around, everything that they're saying has to do with your day-to-day job later on. So unlike the exam, once you pass the exam, you can forget about it. It is not one of those, right? So it is very important that you retain these information and experiences so that it allows you to actually do your work properly. And so it triggers a different kind of attitude, different kind of approach. So my way of looking at it would be, if I sit down with someone and that person is showing me, okay, well, let's open the screen, see this thing, see this thing, see that thing. Obviously, I have a notebook. I'm going to note things down. And well, one thing is very important. As and when that person explains to you anything that doesn't make sense, don't wait. Ask. So a lot of times they would use an abbreviation which they know, but you don't know, right? So don't be afraid to sound, whether this is a stupid question, you should know about it. You're a rookie. So the fact that you don't know is expected. But if you ask, at least after today, you will know. But if you don't ask, and people assume that you know, a month later, and you didn't know, and you did something wrong, it's very hard to explain. So I would say if you want to ask all of these questions that you are afraid to ask, make sure you ask them as early as practically possible during the learning phase where you are supposed to be asking questions. Okay. Instead of feeling a little bit apprehensive and anxious about whether it's the right question to ask. So remove that thought from your mind from a learning perspective. Okay. So pay attention, take good notes, ask the question on the spot. Okay. And when you're done with that session, make sure you go over your own notes to understand what you wrote. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, Francis, but if I'm in a lecture, I'm in a hurry, I'll scribble something down. Later on, I look at that and say, oh, what do I mean by that? Sometimes, you don't understand your own notes because you're just in such a hurry. Now, if that person is going through it too quickly, you can request and say, hey, can you slow down a little bit? I just need to, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit slow, but I don't want to get it wrong. So request if you need the time to slow down, because it's much better that than the next day and you keep on going back and asking questions that they've told you before. Okay. So the learning process is another way of showing your own competence. It is not just about, how much knowledge do I already know? If I already know a lot, then I'm good. If I don't know anything, then I'm bad. It's not like that. To a new job, I assume that you are kind of a white piece of paper, unless you're a doctor or a lawyer, in which case you should know some fundamental things. But business, I don't really put that kind of threshold in there. Okay. So you would want to demonstrate someone who is eager to learn, attentive to listen, detail in observation, and being able to retain all of this knowledge. And the next time you come to work, I'm sure you're still going to either have more questions or do something wrong, but at least you keep that to a very, very minimum. And that, to me, if I was a manager or a supervisor, I would say, hey, this guy really, spent a lot of effort and attention when he's learning. So I don't mind teaching this guy because it's not a waste of time. So I want to really emphasize this point because I have come across graduate myself in my experience where they could have done a better job in this regard. And they're very, very nice people, they're smiling, they're approachable, but I just feel that, they could have done a little bit better and save everybody a lot of time and for them to actually progress quicker, because the more you can demonstrate to me how much you know, the more comfortable I can give you responsibility to handle. And progression in a company is the amount of responsibility I feel comfortable to give you to handle, whether to lead a team, to be in charge of a project or whatever. So you see how this is all related. Okay. So, yeah.
So there's also a small tactic that I thought about as you were talking. So let's say in the first day of onboarding, so it's the second day of official work, that I've learned a lot of new information. I get overwhelmed. Right? So if I do what you suggest, I go over my notes and I find that I have some points that I missed or I don't understand. So after the day of briefing, let's say I go back home and I review the notes, should I go to my boss or the one who teach me the next day and ask for clarification right away in the next day? Or should I, let's say, ask other colleagues or wait until the appropriate timing?
My preference, if this available to you, would be to other colleagues first. Because at that level of questions, probably not a very high level. So I try not to waste my boss's time on me specifically. And colleagues should, if they have been handling my kind of area of expertise of jobs, should understand most of the question that I'm going through, because they should be fairly basic. So I'll go to that first. And that also is related to a question that we'll later cover on. So how do you build relationship? Because it's kind of awkward if you don't know anybody, just to abruptly turn your hand and say, "Hi, excuse me, I'm Kevin. Can you teach me something?" It was kind of, I feel awkward. I don't know about you. And therefore, a lot of people don't do that. And they don't want to go to their boss. So what happened? They just bury it and say, "Okay, well, I'll deal with it later." And then it come back to bite them later on. So, but yeah, to the extent to which you can, I would say, obviously, as early as possible, be friendly to your colleagues within your own team, so that you have some sort of rapport, and that allows you to comfortably approach them for asking questions.
So Kevin, we talked about kind of the ideal behaviors, learning attitudes, what to do that are perceived to be good learning attitude or have a right mindset. Then can you also talk about some common mistakes that you saw new hires when they get through the onboard or training program? Any things to be aware and not to do? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Basically the opposite of what I've just said. You know, so they come in and they bring a notebook, but they don't really write that much notes down. And, and whatever they write down, I don't know how meaningful they are. And then, when you give them something to do, they obviously struggle, and they would ask the colleagues next to them. And sometimes, they would struggle through that period fine, right? But of course, sometimes they don't, and they make a mistake. And then people say, "Well, why did you do that?" I say, "Oh, I didn't know there was this." And say, "Well, didn't anyone teach you?" And say, "Oh," they probably will lie and say, "Nobody taught me." But then most likely someone taught them. They just didn't make the connection, because teaching you something without you being engaged in that thing is very different than using what you've been taught to create something that you're meant to do. One, you are looking someone else doing it. The other one is you using your own hand to create it, right? It's kind of like watching someone cooking, okay? Which is basically, "Oh, I can do that." But if I give you the ingredient and a knife, does it mean that you can equally as easily create the same piece of meal? You and I both know you can't. Not just like that. You have to experience it. You have to, hands-on experience, what we call, right? So that's one. Just not paying enough attention. Not treating it seriously enough, right? They get distracted. They don't go back to their own notes. And secondly is just not a very efficient use of time. They might be at their desk, but they might be spending time that are not productively making progress to the things that they're supposed to learn, right? So they may be overspending the time looking at emails, for example, on things that doesn't really need their attention. But because there's so many emails and you get copied on, sometimes you're on a distribution list, you feel the need to actually read everything. So these are, to me, common sense, but actually to them, it may not be common sense. So I would generally look at emails that are addressed to me, and only addressed to me first. I'll look at those first. And then I'll look at those addressed to me alongside with someone else. So I'm one of the people that get addressed to. I'll do that second. The third is I'll look at emails that is addressed to me because I'm a part of a distribution list, and that email was sent to that distribution list. Now, it doesn't mean that that is unimportant. It could be important because there's a lot of day-to-day emails that people just get sent to distribution list, but at least I'm not the only one watching it. So there are other people doing it. So obviously you're part of the team, you have responsibility too, but it is not as potentially as urgent or as important as the first two categories. Okay. So I would say, build up some sort of a protocol for yourself, how much time and how to spend that time while you're on the email. Okay. And the other thing is limiting the amount of time that you spend on emails. Because you see, when you're on the email, we don't multitask very well. In fact, scientifically, it's proven that we cannot multitask at all. We context switch very quickly between, there's a spreadsheet, there's a PPT, there's this and there's that. It kind of looks like you're very busy, and it kind of looks like you're very confident. Wow, you can do 4 things at the same time. It's just really for the looks. But when it comes to performance and the quality of output from a work perspective, it's far better that you just focus on one thing, get it done first, clean it off, and then you line up the rest, because you find that most of the work that you're given, more likely than not, has a deadline. And you don't want to miss a deadline. It's not a reputation that you want to acquire, that this guy always misses a deadline. And so in order to always meet them, you have to work towards that. That means you have to plan your day and your time allocation in order to meet them. So it's a very deliberate effort. And so my suggestion is to get into this habit of making sure that, as far as you can, I'm not saying, to a unpracticable degree that you have to list everything on a spreadsheet, but I would say generally when you come into work and you start of the day, you might want to get 3 to 5 things on the list of things that those are must do or must be done today. And then you give them a ranking, which one needs to be done first, and practically some by what time, right? So that you can manage, you don't give people surprises, you don't get anxiety because you forgot, oh my God, I forgot this, and you only got 5 minutes to do it, and you rush through that job, okay? All of these are very commonly seen, in my experience, mistakes that are from someone new. So it's about focus, it's about attention, it's about organization, it's about priority, right? I know it doesn't sound like much, but when you go to work, and work itself is not technically challenging, these things become the most relevant parameters for your performance. And I just wanted to get that message out to those people who are joining, whatever service industry or banking and finance or other things, that in a people-to-people business where communication is basically 80% of the work, so to some degree, it matters a lot.
Yeah. So any lasting thoughts or parting thoughts for this question?
Yeah. Thank you, Francis.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin.